All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Hope you're having a good day. Today, we're going to talk about photosynthesis a little bit more in detail. So, I would suggest you take notes for today. So, you can take out your doodle sheet and you can use boxes D and E to take notes for today. You can just cross out what is already there and you can take notes there if you want. Or if you have another place to take notes that you feel more comfortable using, you can do that too, whatever works for you. So just real quick to review what we talked about yesterday. This is what we know already about photosynthesis. We know it happens inside the chloroplast. There's a picture of it right there. We know the inputs, we know the general outputs, and we know that the chloroplast is excited and unexcited. So there's two transfers of energy, right? So if you didn't have anything in Doodle Box C, you can pause the video and add this stuff now. Okay, that's what we know already. But what do we still need to know? So we still need to know a lot about energy. So our driving question is, how do plants get the matter and energy that they need? So we want to think about, how do these inputs get turned into energy that the plants can then use? So let's look at the mechanism for how plants capture the light energy, right? Because we know they use sunlight energy. So let's look at how they capture this energy and how they use it. So there are two transfers of energy. So this means there are two chemical reactions. Okay, this is going back to your do now for today. That's kind of what I was trying to get you guys to get to, is that there's two chemical reactions happening, because for every chemical reaction, there is a transfer of energy. But actually, what is really happening is there's a series of small chemical reactions, and there's really just two main stages of photosynthesis. So scientists have kind of just simplified this photosynthesis into two main stages, or two big chemical reactions: light-dependent reactions and light-independent reactions. Okay, so light-dependent means that light is required, light-independent, light is not required. Okay, so the first stage, here we go. We're going to talk about the basics of the light-dependent reactions. So it takes place inside the thylakoid of a chloroplast. So these little stacks of discs that you see inside of the chloroplast are called thylakoids. You don't necessarily need to know like the whole structure of a chloroplast and be able to label it and things like that, but you do need to know that the first stage of photosynthesis takes place inside this thylakoid. So we're going even smaller than we've gone before, and now we're going inside that thylakoid, inside of the chloroplast. So the molecules that are required are water and light, just for this part, for the first stage. And the molecules that are produced in this first stage are oxygen gas and ATP. If you don't know what ATP is, that's okay. Maybe you might have learned about it before. It's a very high energy molecule. It's very essential, but we'll talk about it later. Okay, so don't worry if you don't know what that is right now. So this first stage, we're going to go a little bit more in detail. So here you can see inside the chloroplast, the thylakoid is kind of zoomed in there. So this is just the membrane of that thylakoid, so just the outer edge of it. And inside this thylakoid membrane, there's this cluster of pigment molecules. And you guys know from your reading yesterday that the pigment molecules that are here are chlorophyll. Hopefully you just said chlorophyll right there. So the chlorophyll is what gives leaves their green color, and that's the pigment molecules that we're going to be focusing on today. So this cluster of pigment molecules is inside this thylakoid membrane here. And then light will strike specifically the chlorophyll. And the electrons inside of these chlorophyll pigments will become excited. So again, if you don't know what excited means, it just basically means that those electrons will jump up in orbital level. Remember, think about the model of an atom and how there's orbitals outside of the nucleus. So the electrons will jump up in orbital level when they become excited. Basically, it just means that they're energized. Okay, you can think of it like that. And once these molecules or electrons are energized, they can then be transferred throughout the membrane, and this is called the electron transport chain. Basically, this electron transport chain will release energy for the next few steps of photosynthesis. You don't need to know any details about the electron transport chain. All you need to know is that the electrons that are excited are then able to provide energy for the rest of this stage. Okay, that's where the energy comes from, which originally comes from sunlight. So now let's look inside the thylakoid. So pretend that this green oval here is one of those little thylakoids, okay? So if you're looking inside of the thylakoid, at the top here you have our cluster of chlorophyll pigments, and we have 3 excited pigments there. So let's just pretend that's what those are, okay? And we have the lightning bolts are just showing energy being released by those electrons, okay? And then the energy that's being released is then able to split, well, first thing is then able to split water to then form oxygen gas. And the second thing that that energy is then able to do is to add a phosphate molecule to a ADP molecule. So ADP is just another biological molecule. Don't need to know the specifics of it. All you need to know is that when ADP and phosphate come together, they make ATP. Okay, so those electrons are able to provide that energy to split water and to form ATP. Now, if you are not really a visual learner, here I just have basically what I just said written out in a more easy to understand way. So if you are not really a visual learner, you want to take notes written out, go ahead and pause the video now and write these 2 bullet points down. But in summary, the energy from the sun is used to create these essential molecules inside the plant cells. So what are these essential molecules used for, and how do they essentially contribute to the growth of the plant? Because you're probably thinking, oh yeah, there's all this little stuff that's happening in these tiny little parts of the plant, but how does that get this seed to this huge tree? Like, how does that even correlate, right? That's probably what you're thinking. So we're going to keep working on this and keep figuring it out, but one of the essential molecules that will kind of give you a little part of this picture is ATP. So this is a picture of ATP. You don't need to know its structure or what it looks like. I just wanted to show you for visual reference. And ATP is just adenosine triphosphate. That's the long written out name for it, but you don't need to know the name. It's found in all living organisms, and it's extremely essential. We use it for almost all biological reactions. So plants and animals can use it. And it's able to store a lot of energy in its bonds, like a lot. Remember we talked that different molecules have different amounts of stored potential energy in their bonds, right? We talked about that in the chemical reactions unit. So ATP is actually one of those molecules that stores the highest amount, one of the highest amounts of chemical potential energy in living organisms. And so that's why it's so prevalent. That's why it's so important, because it can store a lot of energy. So I kind of think of ATP as like a little energy shuttle. So it's like this little truck that's carrying a bunch of energy inside of it, and it just kind of transfers the energy throughout our body or throughout the plant or wherever it needs to go. So you can kind of think of it like that, is it's just a shuttle that's transferring energy to different parts and where it's needed. Okay, so it's a really efficient process in that way, that our bodies and plants are able to just use this molecule to transfer energy like this. And really ATP, the essential part of it in photosynthesis is it takes the energy from the first stage, that sunlight energy, it's able to capture that and take it to the second stage of photosynthesis, where glucose will then come into play. Okay, so we'll talk about glucose in the second stage tomorrow, but for now, this is the first stage of photosynthesis. So for the rest of class, you can rewatch this video, continue taking notes, and then finish the exit ticket that is on Schoology. And that is all you have to do today.